Good afternoon and most welcome to Heidegger 932. And once more I will addressing the question about the now and its liaisons with the present. Where do we do the dividing line? And what is really the difference between now existence, coherence, consistency and so forth, and the despicable absence of everything else? It seems that there is a strong impetus these days to just have the presence, this full completion of rationality, that everything is from the now. These days we shun everything that has to do with tradition, everything that is old. Stale it becomes, something that should be avoided and not a source of something good, whereas true rationality comes from presencing. This is when the Necker cube is no longer ambiguous. It is completely clear what it is, what it depends on, what it means, and its message shines clear through everything that happens around it. This is the descent of pure rationality. It's not hard to see that these terms go in the same league. To be monosemic, it's an absolute relation to being in the present and there being only one understanding. It is something of a clear view to say that if you want to have even a slightest idea of only one meaning, that needs to be in a very particular moment. And I think maybe from this comes the invention of the monosemic, that there is only one meaning, has a true relationship to the now. And this now is not a now of anything real. This now is an imagined now. This is the metaphysics of presence. It's a presence that we make up. Could even be that is indicated by Jacques Derrida himself, that this is an intended dream. A dream we make up to have something to look forward to, something that we can strive for, because otherwise we know we wouldn't do anything else. We are usually in this time and age completely unsatisfied, and it wouldn't be unfair to say that this is a replacement for the joy of life, joie de vivre. When joie de vivre no longer is present, this is something that takes over. This is the replacement of breathing air, being existent, being in shape or being flexible, having the opportunity to change, having the opportunity to do something else, and being able to have a choice even. Because in the now there is no longer a choice. The world supposedly is stagnated, it's fossilized in this weird now moment, a moment that never comes, but like the carrot the donkey is looking for, it is perpetually in front of you, and therefore you strive. And that is it's a very important part of the equation to understand, that the now is always unattainable. This is how it was constructed from the very outset. It was made to be unattainable. It is part and parcel of what it is to be a now, something you never ever can reach. And that is all intended. This is not something of a surprise for the ego. This is something the ego always already is aware of. It knows that it will never be able to get there. And this makes it possible to constantly wanting to have it. The very unapproachability of the now is an important ingredient for the ego. This is with this despair that the ego has the possibility to be ruling, and this is also the possibility of putting this constrictive mold on reality, because you have given up the idea of a vividness, of a liveliness, of something that actually gives you both information, knowledge and pleasure, for something that is unpleasurable, unwanted. It has instead become a must, an obligation. There is no freedom, and that is the very essence of metaphysics, of course, the metaphysics of presence. It is no freedom, it's the very lack of freedom. And this token is something in your sterile and desert-like environment that is your inner life and your outer life, is something you replace this. And the thing you want is as barren as the world you created. Needs to be that way. It is possibly a little change of something delightful. It has maybe the perfume of something that could lure you or entice you, but it is always incredibly little. Most of the now is a dead corpse. It is something past. It is a dead parrot that never have been alive and never can spring into liveliness. And that is a very important point of the now. I think this saying from St. Augustine is pertinent here. A sign is something which, in addition to the substance absorbed by the senses, calls to mind of itself some other thing. And it's this other thing that is the now. It is the other thing of the stability, the fixatedness, the cemented reality, and the other side of this cemented reality, that is the now. Saussure said something similar. The constitutive mark of every sign in general resides in its double character. It's bipartite. It has two aspects, one sensible and the other intelligible. And this is, in the eyes of Derrida and also in mine now, something very suspect. The sign is premised on a binarism, and this is suspiciously something that looks like a foundational concept, something that we know to be the very taste of Western foundational thinking. The very difference, to cite Derrida, is between signifier and signified, and that is no doubt the governing pattern within which Platonism institutes itself as philosophy. Då får hon ge mig lite glass. But Saussure's sign might be useful to the critique of phenomenology. Especially he emphasizes that the signifier and the signified are indissolubly related. He insists that each requires the other. They cannot exist apart. Saussure conjures two metaphors. Signifier and signified are body and soul, or they are recto and verso of a leaf of paper. And here you have another take on the reality of the now and its object. The very stillness is the reverso of the paper. The recto is the very nowness. So it's a mirror image. You see the stillness of the world and you take that to be nowness. You start looking for nowness and you get stillness of the earth. But you can't have both at the very same time. This doubled nature is the mirror image that make up the bipartite system in Western metaphysical foundationalism. I don't think it's so hard to see here how coherence and consistency are similar to perfection in mirror forms. It's the very idea that perfection is possible. And without going into detail, perfection is the least you think when you go into the Gödelian revelation that mathematics cannot be consistent nor coherent at the same time. And the reason for that is it is not even working in principle. There is no practical way of having this weird symmetry. It is just a wish. So one could call the one side a wish and the other one a mirror side of the wish. And none of them are partaking in reality. And they make each other happen at the very same time. And that simultaneity, that perceived simultaneity, is what we take to be real. Just because there is a time lag, we think reality is something foundational, something that is not something we could change by mind or will or something like that. But that is not true. What we perceive is a time lag that we self-created. So the very idea of an unmovable word of Plato, Aristotle or Socrates, St. Augustine or Saussure or Austin or whoever, it's a making of the world itself. It's a making of our mind. That is very important to understand. And this is why it's so very tough to get out of the simulacra, because it is constantly correcting its own faults and it's blinding its own faults. This is very similar to how I mentioned earlier that we forget that we don't achieve our plans anymore. And this forgetfulness is also closely connected to the now. The now means forgetfulness, forgetting about time. Because in the now you don't have any awareness of what is past, and neither do you have any awareness what futuring will be. And this is why most people think this is a place of relief somehow. The mirror image of the illusionary ego is the now in some way, and it makes for a world that is completely stable just because it's not real. So instead, as Hilbert said, or Gödel said, or all the other mathematicians, including Bertrand Russell and Gottlob Frege, they were thinking that consistency and non-paradoxality will make mathematics real. It will, on the contrary, make it unreal. Consistency and non-paradoxality is what constitutes unreality. That is part and parcel of the simulacra. This is part and parcel of what you self-simulate to be a reality. And as it comes back so pure, so consistent and non-paradoxical, that is a result of the sameness self-reflection causes. And this is why people who are suffering from schizophrenia, as Ian McKilker showed, but also people of the autism spectrum, always feel that they are completely right. The reason is because they don't take in the outer world, and then automatically you become self-right. Actually, oddly enough, it has not so much to do with the world, neither it has anything to do with what themselves are. It is a loop that directly tells this is true, or this is correct, or this is real, or this is the other side of the mirror, something similar to that. It is just the opposite, it's unreality. The consistency and the non-paradoxality is exactly non-reality. And this thin point consciousness that I've been talking about before has its equivalence in the point origo. It doesn't have an extension, doesn't have a width, doesn't have a breadth, doesn't have a depth. And this is peculiarly very similar to the mirror image, because the mirror image doesn't have any width, breadth or depth to it. And that is one of those few things in the universe until quite recently that were dimensionless. The mirror image is the first thing that human beings ever seen that lacks completely dimension. Could have been possibly some wall paintings of a cave, but even those are, because of the very structure of the cave, sticking out, and often they are actually, oddly enough, painted in a three-dimensional way, not a symbolic way. It came later. They are incredibly good depictions of bisons, giraffes, antelopes, wolves and so forth. Oddly enough, this is the first time quadruped animals like horses and bisons are depicted in the correct way, where having not a single hoof in the ground when they gallop. That was a reality that was hidden out of the focus for people for more than 10,000 years. All Greek thought that a quadruped animal constantly had at least one or two hoofs in the ground when they were galloping. It's not until high-speed photography were developed in the late 19th century in France that we were able to catch a horse with all four hooves in the air. But that goes to show that reality became something extinct in the development of the simulacrum. And we are taught, actually, in the educational system today, to get more solipsistic, to trust more these self-similarity patterns, this locking mechanism, how to make oneself true is considered a good thing, whereas in real case scenario it is always a really bad thing, because it locks you out of the real world around you, which is never 100% correct, neither is 100% incorrect. It has all these levels of understanding, which goes for its complex, iterated, fractal reality. The fractal reality is more level of complexity rather than this shining structure that the mirror is at hand. I think it could be fair to call this presence the pharmakon. It's a self-constructed goal, a telos we make, and it's very convenient because we can always bring it up. Soon as we sense that nothing is happening, everything has gone down to stability and there is no change, you have this boring feeling of everything being all too familiar, you have gone into the simulacrum of self-producing reality. And then you can think for yourself that there is a mirror image to this, either the thing looking into the mirror or the thing that you get back when you look into the mirror. And this could be called the pharmakon of presence. And whereas you think this is the Sabian portion that will bring you back to that liveliness you've been wishing for such a long time, it is also the very poison. This is the thing that binds you. This is the thing that makes it impossible for you to sort of break out of the spell of the pharmakon. So pharmakon is both the spell and also the very way of being locked into this specific posture, not coming anywhere, not going anywhere, and by then you started to defy and reject all sorts of difference. And not only difference, the reality of the Necker cube, the ambiguous thing of the Necker cube, of the Möbius strip, of the Klein bottle and many other things, it is something that now looks fearsome. This is reality. Necker cube is what reality is all about. And you have become to try to look away from it. And that is, of course, a very important trait in this loop-like structure. Yeah. The recto and reverso is quite a good metaphor, because the only thin layer that sort of substitute or constitute the divisioning line between the recto and the verso is so thin it is almost imperceptible. And I think that is actually a very good lead to understanding how this thing works. It is so close to each other so that they are actually the very same thing. And what you need to do to sort of continue to be stuck in the illusion of the recto and the verso, or the now and the ego, is to constantly trying to occupy yourself with the idea of a difference here. And of course this also goes for the construction of the unreal past. The past is, for this structure, the recto and the verso structure of the paper, it's a sort of an enemy, because in the past it cannot enforce its perception of being divided. The past is more or less unambiguous, more or less unambiguous. It cannot be molded in that way into two parts. It is clear. In some ways one can even say that the past is the only thing that has only one direction, whereas the undecidability of the no is a sort of an enemy of clear direction. In the past you have a clear direction. You know where you're going. This is knowledge, and in an odd way it only has one meaning. In that sense, having only one direction. whereas the now goes in so many different directions, and this is something that is not noticeable to modern man, just because of the tendency of getting rid of the past. We get rid of our memories, so we cannot be aware that we are constantly changing position. And this is true for all modern men today, this constant change of position. Try one thing for a while, and then we try another thing, and then we try a third thing. And this constant changing of direction, going into one sort of perception, and then you change your modulation to yet another one. It is constantly going on forever, and it needs to go on forever. Otherwise, you cannot continue to look into the now. The now can only be upheld by this constant changing. And instead of having a clear direction, this change is the only energy you can have. So modern man changes their view within a 6 to 12 months period. That's the normal thing. Whereas the polarities remain oddly the very same all the time. The positions they take in contrast to others constantly change. This is of course instability, both in bodily figment, where we lead one moment to one side, and then we lead to the other side, and then we lead to the third side, and then we lead to the fourth side. This is the reality of direction. There is no strong direction in one whole. And to substitute the lack of a real direction, we invent the monosemic idea. And this is sort of a plastic proxy. When we cannot have direction, we make up this direction ourselves to give an imagination that we have clear direction. But it's purely from a neurological perspective, but also from big investigations and research. We know today the most typical trait of modern man is the constant changing of view, and that means also a change of position in space. Quite literally, when we are no longer balanced, we don't know where we are, we're not situated. So we look more like lemmings than human beings in this stage. And although it can sound like a huge criticism, it has a very positive message in the background. And that positive message is now there is really hope for a through-going change, where we can actually change something through and through in a way that actually works. And I would say this is a very great promise. The reason to go into deconstruction is to regain this directionality, and it's an impetus, it's an energy, and it also means that you will progress, because it's only when you acquire the past once more that you can gain knowledge. Outside of past there is no knowledge, there is no progression, and there is no learning. It could be said to be the closing down of the Western mind, because we know that to be no myth has been proven way too many times. And I would say deconstruction, rather than being a threat to rationality, maybe not protecting rationality, but looking to something much more pertinent, much more valuable than rationality. And it could show that the common concept of rationality is not that clear as we thought. It's much more polysemic, richer, and more grounded in a reality of different things, of radical otherness and such stuff. And we can go into the details and understand that it works differently in different ways, and that rather just to call rationality obfuscate what it's about. It covers everything up, and so that you can't see it, and so that you can't access it with your own awareness. And if that's not very hopeful, I don't know what, but it's incredibly interesting. I will later dwell even further into Robert Magliola His Derrida on the Man makes hope shine through once more in a very seductive way, I would say so far. But I think it's to round up now. I say thank you very much and I wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye.